net at the volleyball game or something. Now, there's going to be a meeting in January, then one in November, and then we're going to do it on the 10th of December, back to November the 12th.
We'll get you figured out.
It's crazy what's been going on, so.
We'll call the Vermilion
Hopefully
County Council
email you
October
when.
meeting to order,
Yes.
please. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, roll call. Mr. Costello.
Here.
Mr. Weir.
Here.
Mr. Somerville.
Here.
Mr. Bush.
Here.
Mrs. James, I'm here. Mr. Greer.
Here.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
All right, first we have approval of minutes. We have minutes from our budget hearing meetings on September 13th and September 14th, and also our regular meeting for September 15th. Are there any corrections or comments regarding the minutes?
Make a motion to approve both minutes, 13th and 14th.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion by Mr. Weir, a second by Mr. Greer to approve the September minutes. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Minutes are approved. Right, next you have your treasurer's report. Are there any questions or concerns regarding the treasurer's report? None. Please note that we did receive the treasurer's report. Next, we have our comp time report. Again, are there any comments or concerns regarding comp time? None? All right, we're moving along tonight. Transfers of funds, we do have a couple that are reporting only. We had one from drainage and one from the surveyor. They are just for your review.
Which of those? The
Pardon?
first two?
Yep, the drainage one was $1,000. They moved from clerical assistant to office supplies.
They say reporting only, no.
No.
Oh. Oh, yep, okay. Sorry, I missed that one.
Well, no doesn't always.
The details.
Hey, thanks for keeping me in mind tonight. All right, we do. All right, the first one is from the drainage department. It is transferring $1,000 from clerical assistant to office supplies. It's for monitor upgrade for location mapping, postage files, and containers. It will need to be.
I would make a motion to allow the transfer of funds.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right. I have a motion by Mr. Costello, a second from Mr. Brown. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor of allowing the transfer, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. All right. Transfer is approved. And the second transfer is from the surveyor. It is transferring $4,000 in total. It is transferring $1,000 from the head chairman, $2,000 from extra help, and $1,000 from surveyor helper. And they're transferring those into accounts, $1,000 for office supplies and $3,000 for surveyor supplies. The explanation is to purchase office supplies and surveyor supplies.
Those aren't positions that get paid out, right? With like the head chain man and the extra.
Never have, as far as I know.
Never have.
Getting it done.
Never have.
Maybe we'll have to look at that next year to see if you could improve his supplies line items and eliminate some of these
We
on.
did.
Yeah.
On the budget, we changed it.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So this is just current, okay, I'm sorry. I would make a motion to approve this one as well for $4,000.
Second.
All right, I have a motion from Mr. Costello, a second from Mr. Brown, to allow the surveyor's transfer. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. Transfer is approved. That was the end of the transfers. We do have one additional appropriation this evening. The Community Crossings Grant has issued the check for $817,330. So we need to appropriate the check into the three districts, District 1, 2, and 3, for the grant monies.
Motion to approve.
Second. Already got it.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Bush, second by Mr. Brown, for the additional appropriation of $817,330 for the Community Crossing Grant Fund monies. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. Appropriations approved. That was our only additional this evening. Next on our agenda is open issues for the budget adoption, but we're going to go ahead and move that to the end. That way if there's further discussion on that, we have time for that. So we're going to move on to new business. First we had Sheriff Phelps send us a inquiry about the check they received from destroying old firearms and evidence. He would like to know how the money should be put into the account. Is it put into the Sheriff's Trust and then the firearms at the end of the month, or the Sheriff's Trust and then the County General Fund? See here? I don't see him, but it's for $820.
Didn't it go into county general?
I believe it has, like, when the other things have been sold, like surplus, it goes back into County General,
Right.
so,
I would think that would go the same place the others have.
okay. Is everyone good with County General?
Yes.
Brenda, can you let him know that we decided on County General? Thank you. All right. Next on new business is the Elanco TIF bonds, and we do have some guests today. Is there an order that you would like to?
Well, let me do that, yeah, so I'll give you a brief introduction to what this is kind of all about from way up high. And then we have Emma behind me somewhere from Baker Tilly who can go through there's a financial report that shows how we're gonna pay for all this, where the money's coming from, where it's going towards. And then I also have Tom Pittman is joining us from probably a beach somewhere. He's our bond lawyer who's been helping us put together this project and get all the legal documents together, and perhaps can explain the actual ordinance that's in front of you. Back in 2009, Vermilion County created its first TIF district, its first economic development area. It was done in conjunction with White Construction's new corporate headquarters down on the south end of the county. They needed water and sewer for that headquarters, and so we created a 28-acre TIF district and economic development area that consisted entirely of just their little piece down there. Not all of what White's owns, but just the piece where their headquarters is, between the tracks and the highway. And so we created this economic development area, we created an allocation area within there, and we used the tax dollars that White has been paying over the last decade to pay for the sewer and water lines that were extended to them. The Redevelopment Commission had been having discussions anyway about potentially expanding that economic development area to go a little bit further north down the highway, in anticipation that that would be a good area to promote growth and development in the county, because that is a good area for those things to happen. We've got the highway, we've got the railroad, you've got the river, close to I-70, not too far from I-74. In the meanwhile, we were approached by Dylan. This is back when Dylan was still at Economic Development, and he had been having discussions with Elanco about they were considering making an investment in Vermilion County. So this started about a year ago, and we've been having discussions with Elanco ever since. And so there is and we have some folks from Elanco here this evening. This is Casey. She's the local, I call her the lady in charge. She's in charge of Clinton. A couple lawyers from Indianapolis, Brant and Steve. And so we've been going back and forth and having a bunch of meetings about how to structure this. So we have come up with a proposal for that calls for Elanco to make a $105 million investment in Vermilion County over the next decade in equipment at their Clinton facility, as an incentive to encourage them to make that investment. We would agree to issue revenue, what are called TIF revenue bonds, which TIF revenue means that the taxes that are paid on that equipment are pulled off, sort of off the top. Okay, so when they pay, and they will pay a lot of taxes on that equipment over the years. That money gets pulled off the top into, we call it captured. We capture those monies, we put them into something called an allocation fund. We already have, we just have more money in it. And then we use the money that's paid on that new equipment to pay for the debt over the next 25 years. That's how we did White's, essentially. And that's similar to what we'd be doing here with Elanco. Tom, are you still with us? Would you, I don't know if I've adequately explained that or not. I gave a lot of history there. I know the council has a bond resolution in front of them this evening. Would you perhaps explain what that resolution does or says for them, or do you want me to take a stab at it?
You're doing great. Go ahead.
Yeah, great. So this resolution or ordinance has to be voted on you twice. This would authorize the issuance of up to $13 million in TIF bonds. Now, we don't think it'll take $13 million. We think it'll probably be somewhere closer to 11.8 or 11.9 of TIF bonds. Those would be payable over 25 years with an interest rate not to exceed 6%. That interest rate is probably higher than what it will be. These are taxable bonds, so they won't get the same. We won't get as good an interest rate on these bonds as we did with the jail bonds. This ordinance will have to come. This is why we're trying to schedule this other meeting. This ordinance also has to come back in front of you a second time, as well as a few other things related to this project. The lease approval, for example, I think has to come back before you. It's very. I was talking to Tom about this other day. This is absolutely as complicated a financial structure as we can have for a project like this. But it requires the meeting of 5 different boards with 26 people on them, ultimately, to get this approved. But it's something that the Redevelopment Commission has already voted once to approve this. They will have to meet a second time in November to approve this. The consensus of the Redevelopment Commission was that this is a good project for our county because it represents, Elanco is our biggest employer, it's our second biggest taxpayer. And I'm 50 years old, and Elanco has been here my whole life. They are not much older than me, but they're a little bit older than me, or they were Lilly before, of course. And I grew up looking out my window and could see Elanco from my window. So to me, they've been there forever. And our consensus was that having an investment of this magnitude from our biggest taxpayer, or second biggest taxpayer, biggest employer, is a positive, very positive impact for our county. But it will also generate additional revenues for our county, for our TIF district, for our redevelopment commission to invest in expanding and growing that entire corridor between White Construction and Elanco. So, and Emma can get into the numbers on it if you'd like her to do that, or we can, if you guys have any questions for her or Tom about what we're doing or why we're doing it. I know it's convoluted. It is extremely convoluted transaction. There's no doubt about it. So, but ultimately, the short version is we're going to take Elanco's tax dollars that they pay over the next 25 years, and we're going to be essentially giving most of that back to them. 80%, it's an 80-20 split.
Emma, do you want to give a breakdown of the handout real quick? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Emma Adlam. I'm with Baker Tilly. I think I gave everyone a handout, but is anyone missing?
That's right.
I got an extra.
Okay, I have an extra one. Okay, so we put some schedules together for you to kind of illustrate this proposed project. So I'm going to start with the investment, then how that translates into tax increment, and then how that translates into the bond issue. So if you turn to the second page, the first page of numbers, this shows the investment assumptions and focusing on personal property within the facility. So currently, the number at the top, the $355 million, is the current personal property within the facility, and then you can see that they're, over a 10-year period, are proposing to invest $105 million over that 10-year period. The next page shows what that looks like translating into tax increment dollars. So, forgive me if I'm saying something that you already know, but the way that for tax increment, the existing $355 million is not really part of this project. It's only the additional investment. So this is focusing on the tax increment generated is from that $105 million over that 10-year period. So really focus on the right-hand column. You see the net tax increment, and it increases over that 10-year period because every year they're investing a little bit more and a little bit more every year. So by 2032 is when all the investment is supposed to kind of come online and be assessed, and so it would be just under 1.4 million of tax increment dollars per year. So if you turn to the next page, this is the illustrated sources and uses for this proposed bond issue. So the structure that the county is looking at is pledging 80% of that tax increment stream to the bond issue. And so the bonds are sized with that 20%, or 80%. So you're going to keep 20%. The RDC will have 20% to do other projects that are in serving or benefiting your TIF area. And so this is the estimated par amount based on the 80% that you're pledging. So the bonds would be just over $11,800,000. The actual size would be determined based on the day of the bond sale. This would generate about $9.4 million of proceeds for the project or the incentive. You have to borrow money as a part of the bond issue to pay interest. It's called capitalized interest until the TIF is really up and going. You don't have money on hand to make those interest payments, so you have to borrow as a part of that. Then there is an underwriter's discount, which is the fee the purchaser of the bonds would charge. This is the maximum fee that they could charge. It might be less. And then there is a debt service reserve, which is an additional layer of security. So these bonds are going to be secured by this pledged TIF. It's going to have a company guarantee. There's going to be a debt service reserve, which is equal to the maximum annual principal and interest payment. So the biggest payment that you would make. And then finally, the county would be pledging their special benefits tax. So it's a property tax backup. So if all of the TIF disappears, if the company doesn't actually make their guarantee, if you've used your debt service reserve, then you would be promising to levy a property tax for this. But there are lots of layers of security that come before that. It's more of a backup to enhance marketability of the bonds. And then there's a little bit, and then there's about 200,000 for the cost of issuance involved in bringing the bonds to market and closing. So if you turn to the next page, this is the illustrative amortization schedule. So the bonds by statute can't be longer than 25 years. So that's why the term is just over 24.5 years. So this is the maximum term that you can have for the bond issue. Like Scott mentioned, they're going to be taxable bonds. So that's why the interest rate you're seeing is higher than what you saw for your bonds you issued earlier this year. And your annual payments, if you look on the right-hand side, those illustrative lease rentals, they're lower in the earlier years, and they build up to match up when all of that TIF comes online, because the investment's over that 10-year period. And so finally, the last page compares that pledged tax increment. So this is page 6. If you work from the left to the right, on the left you see the estimated pledged TIF revenues. That's that 80% of the TIF stream. And then you compare it to the lease rental payments, and there is revenue remaining, and you see it's 125%. And that's because when you issue bonds and they're payable from TIF, you need a level of coverage. So the ratio of your revenues to your debt service can't be 1, because TIF does fluctuate and tax rates change, so you need a level of coverage to give you extra cushion that you won't need any of those other forms of backup on the bond issue. So you see it gets up to about 225,000. So that, if everything goes as planned, you would have that left over for redevelopment projects. And then on the right-hand side, the estimated RDC tax increment, that's that 20% that would not be pledged to the project that you would have for projects as well. So I went through these fairly quickly, but if there are any concepts you want me to go back to, or any numbers you want me to revisit?
Any questions for Emma? Anybody? You did a good job explaining it. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
And I did neglect, I'm sorry, I want to make sure you did catch this, because I should have said that. These will be guaranteed. You'll have a proposed taxpayer agreement with Alonco to guarantee the payments as well. So we've structured, these have been structured in a way to try and make them very marketable and get the best interest rate we can, while also building in between the 125% coverage ratio, the debt service reserve, the company guarantee. We've got a lot of layers of, we hope, of protection in there to make sure these do get paid. So.
Scott, the property you're talking about in a TIF going up that way, is that all the property that's on the east side of that highway?
Well, we've expanded the area. I don't know if I shared the map with you guys or not, now that I think about it. I have some in here. We expanded the economic development area itself to both sides of the highway. Airport, the old Breezeway Theater, all that area is in the economic development area, all the way up to Alonco. There's a county road just on the north side of Alonco, so we go to that county road and across. We go about a quarter mile in or so, pick up the airport and all that frontage along the highway. Now, the only parts that are in what are called the allocation area, the only parts where the taxes are going to be captured are White Construction and Alonco. The rest of it, at this point, there's nothing to capture. There's no growth happening there yet. So there's nothing to capture there, so they're not part of our allocation area or our TIF area.
Yeah, so if someone lives within that TIF area, they're not in the allocation area, so their personal property tax won't change. It won't affect them at
We
all.
won't capture anything if Buddy White builds another new house a little closer to the highway, we're not going to get any new tax money from it. But if some company did want to do something in that area, we may then want to consider, well, maybe we should add that to our allocation area to capture that revenue. But it actually does also open up that corridor. TIF has a lot of uses and restrictions and rules about how it can be spent, but it certainly can be spent on projects in serving or benefiting that area. So if somebody did want to bring an investment into that area, just like Alonco's doing, if Alonco wanted to add on, or if somebody else wanted to build something up there, we would have the tool in our box already to help them with that project. If they needed sewer lines, water lines, roads, something like that, we'd have a source of revenue to pay for them.
As far as zoning, it's
Doesn't
not
affect that
change.
at all. It's already zoned that's all zoned commercial industrial anyway, but.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, but it doesn't affect the zoning. They'd still have to come in if they wanted to do something, if there needed to be a variance or something like that, they would still have to get that approved. So. And it actually doesn't affect, like, Elanco doesn't pay more in taxes than what they would pay otherwise. They're just going to get a big chunk of that, money back in a way. So, but it encourages them to make the investment, is the goal.
So in order for the bonds to be issued, we have to vote on the ordinance twice. Tonight would be the first vote. You have the ordinance 2021-17 in front of you this evening. Are there any questions regarding the ordinance?
Are you gonna do like a roll call vote, or how do you do?
We got a motion first.
Yeah.
Motion, okay, I didn't know if you were gonna do that.
So,
And we'll have to vote on, you do have to vote on this again, so.
yep.
This is like a preliminary vote, I guess.
I'll make a motion that we accept the ordinance number 2021-17.
Second that.
All right. I have a motion from Mr. Weir, a second from Mr. Dreer to allow ordinance 2021-17 for the authorizing the issuance of the Vermilion County, Indiana taxable economic development revenue bonds. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. All right, ordinance is approved for the first vote. Our second vote will be in November.
Well, Tom, are you still with us?
Yes, and it's important that you not finally pass it tonight, because the law requires that before final passage that there be a hearing by the Economic Development Commission, which has not occurred. And so the timetable we've got contemplates that required hearing by the Economic Development Commission in advance of the future meeting.
And Tom, before the meeting started, we were having a discussion about the possibility of trying to, instead of having our current timetable calls for Economic Development Commission and the council to have their meeting on the 8th, and the Redevelopment Commission to meet on the 10th. We were discussing the possibility for attendance issues of just moving all those meetings and doing them all in the 10th. If we got them in the right order, I think that we could do it that way.
I agree. I agree.
So we may discuss that this evening. I mean, we have some other business you need to take care of, but I just wanted to make sure with you while we still had you on the phone that if we could, for convenience sake, it might make it easier for members of the council to attend, and probably make it easier for Elanco if we could just do it all in one meeting instead of them having to make 2 trips over here. So.
That makes good sense to me.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions regarding it? No. I just want to say thank you to Elanco. You've always been an important part of our community, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank
You've been very good to work with.
Thank you. Appreciate your presence tonight. All right. Anything else for the TIFs ones? No? All right. We can go ahead and move on to our next item.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay and listen if you like. You guys are too.
I will, but yeah. Okay, good night, everybody.
Thank
Safe
you.
travels.
And we are going to be in front of the county commissioners next week about this too. They're going to meet on the 26th. They have various approvals that they have to make. I think Tom's going to come over for that meeting. So that's a morning meeting. So we do have a lot of meetings to get through. Thank you.
Okay, we'll figure out that schedule. Sure. Our next item on new business is the approval of the electronic meeting policy. This policy represents the new state law that was passed in July, I believe, right? July?
Yes, took effect in July.
Yeah, okay. It took effect in July. It basically gives the ability for someone to, if you miss a meeting, you can communicate electronically. We still have to have at least 4 members present, but you can now vote. Before, if you were remoting in, you couldn't vote, but now you can.
Yeah, there's an emergency, right? The governor's, there's still a state emergency. So right now, actually, we can meet virtually and people can vote. But once the emergency ends, which hopefully it's going to at some point.
It's scheduled for the end of October.
Yeah,
right
it
now,
goes,
right?
every month it keeps getting
Yeah.
continued. So, but once that emergency dies, poor choice of words, we then, the difference with this policy and before is you could always have called in and listened, I suppose, or watched.
You just couldn't move.
You couldn't vote. This allows you to vote even if you're not physically present.
And we are looking into BIS to see if we can do like a Zoom in here. We just don't know the cost.
Okay. It does say, like, in order to vote at the meetings, you have to be present after your second, like, virtual one at this, like, the policy.
Oh, so I can't just stay at home for the rest of my term?
If you're sick, you can. There's
yeah,
exceptions.
I guess, yeah, but, so.
All these rules are state, it's in the code. So that's why there's all this stuff about, you know, you can miss if you're in the military.
They thought of that, yeah, all these things they thought of.
I forgot one.
Must physically
figured it out yet.
attend half of them.
Huh?
You must physically attend half of them.
I already knew that.
So we would need to approve the policy if we want to adopt it.
Well, personally, I think it's a good thing.
Motion.
Okay. Motion, do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
All right, I have a motion for Mr. Bush, a second for Mr. Costello to approve the policy on participating in meetings via electronic communication. Is there any further discussion? All right. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Policy is approved. All right, the next item on new business is the amended salary ordinance. There are 3 items on the salary ordinance. The first one is the Director for Economic Development. Mr. Doug Hess is here this evening. He is the new hire for Economic Development, and so his salary is stated there, so we need to update the salary ordinance for his salary. Also, there is a relocation fee of $2,500. The Economic Development Council approved. And then the reason it's on the salary is because it is taxable on his W-2, so it needs to be added to the salary ordinance. And then the third item is a stipend or bonus for the deputy director for Lynn Brewer in the amount of $15,000. The Economic Development Council is asking, they voted and agreed to give her the bonus stipend for being the only one in the office and doing the duties of both positions in the vacancy of the Economic Development Director from, I believe, March to, you start October 1st. So she was there by herself the whole time, and so they're wanting to give her the bonus for doing double duty. So they do have the money in their budget. It's just that we have to update the actual salary ordinance, so they don't need additional money.
This will be a one-time deal for the stipend?
Yes, the stipend is a one-time. But the state requires any kind of compensation to be added to it, the ordinance.
You need 3 different ones, or?
We can
1, 2?
vote individually, or you can vote them all together.
I'll make a motion, we do them all.
Okay. I have a motion for all 3 items on the salary ordinance.
I second that motion. That's good.
Bush, Dreer. I have a motion for Mr. Bush, a second for Mr. Dreer, to amend the salary schedule for all 3 items. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. All right. Salary schedule is amended.
Scott, in the instance that one of these would have been objectionable to one of the council members, would that ruin the whole vote for all three
We'd
at
have
the
to
same
amend
time?
it or something. We'd have, or you know.
Start over, a new
Each one.
motion or something.
Yeah.
I mean, I have no opposition to it, I'm just.
Well, if one person, I mean, I guess, you know.
Well, there were three
Three
things
items
to
on one.
approve, and if somebody goes, well, I agree with the first two, but not the third one here, and I
I'd
vote
change it.
no, and then all three die,
Mhm.
but, you know, that's what I was saying, but,
I've changed it.
huh?
I've changed it to one. That's just an ask her if one's all right.
No, that's fine,
I
I
agree
kinda
with
wondered
you.
how that worked, because we've
Sure.
done that before, we've had three, but they were actually different things, these are
Mhm.
the same thing for the same, amendment to the same thing.
Sure.
Is it separate?
No, he was just wanting procedurally wise if it occurred.
Yeah, I was just asking a procedure question, sometimes we run into these,
Right,
and
I
I'm just
agree.
kinda seeing
No,
how we
I
handle
definitely
them.
agree.
Okay.
They're all different.
That was the end of our open issues, new business. We'll go back to our open issues, which is the budget adoption.
I do have one thing to bring up when we discuss the budget adoption for the
Mhm.
public safety lit money.
Okay.
With the fire department specifically.
Okay.
We talked about,
You wanna go ahead and we can start with that?
well, we don't have to, I just wanted to make sure it didn't get missed and before we ended discussions, so. And it was related to the discussions at the budget hearings that we had regarding the applications or the requests from the fire department.
Right.
So, and I wasn't really sure on the procedure of how to address, you know, whether or not we accept certain things in the budget at this point and how that works, so.
So we have the $50,000 for each fire department in
Right.
there. If we approve the budget, then we can always change it in January, and we don't have to actually disperse
Yeah.
all of it.
Okay.
So
You
it
can- you
would
can
be
do
left in there to be.
Just the same way you do additional appropriations,
Yeah.
you can do reductions. If you
Okay.
wanted to change something a couple months from now. Or you could do, I mean, it doesn't have to be in January, it could be in February or March.
Yeah.
And mainly, it was just in terms of information gathering for the departments on their projects for the next year, some questions that we all had on, or some of us had on, you know, whether or not to allow, or, you know, what are we doing? Some of them were pretty vague, to be honest. I mean, some of the applicants were pretty vague.
Yeah, the letters we received, and as far as the form for filling out, like asking the fire departments to just kind of state where they spent the money, where they're wanting to use the money.
Yeah, and that's what I made up a document
Okay.
here that I was gonna show you.
And then, did you put a date on there as far as returning it?
Yeah.
Okay, what's the?
But it was arbitrary. I mean, I put it for Wednesday,
The third.
yeah, the 3rd,
I told
or no,
him.
yeah, no, Wednesday, November 3rd.
Yes.
So that we would have time before the
look at
next
it.
meeting,
Is
but
that
the next
December?
meeting may be different now.
November?
Yeah,
Is
for
it?
November.
I think it's gonna be on the 10th-ish.
Okay, well,
But that's still good.
even
The
still,
third
give
gives
us
you a
more
week.
time to.
Gives us a week.
See, I figured that, you know, if the fire departments say, okay, look, we can answer this as one page, there's some questions on here, we can answer these questions. Everyone here needs a chance to get that emailed to them so they can review it. So at some point in time, you can agree or disagree with whatever's being asked for.
Good idea.
Every department head has to answer for their, you know, their
Mhm.
budgets, so I would assume that everyone should be able to answer, you know, for their requests, every department.
Right.
And we also need to look at it from, in the sense that, you know, it's definitely not free money, and it's coming out of people's paychecks, so it has to be put to good use. We have to ensure that, it's our job. So, you know, a little more information would be nice, but they don't know what to provide unless we ask for it, so now we'll be asking for it. So. And we've done it in the past, it was more complex than it needed to be in the past.
Right.
We'll
Yep.
get there, I mean,
We've
we'll figure it
simplified it.
out eventually how we're gonna do it, but.
Okay, is everyone good with the, have return date of the 3rd?
Sure.
Gives us about a week to review. Is that all right?
And then if after the meeting, if you guys want to say, well, what kind of questions are you going to ask, or during the meeting, whichever, I can read those off or give you copies of these to look at. I think, and if you see anything else, like, hey, what about this, we need to ask this too, let me know and I'll change it.
I had talked to Kevin Wiggins, because he'd called in about it. And was like, I make our fire department sign something saying this is what we're purchasing,
Using
or
it for.
this is the money. So I told him maybe that would be something he could come in and talk about, give some information on what they do.
He doesn't do that with tax money, or with this public safety. He's just paying the fire department out. He's just the person in between that pays us, just like anybody else.
But does he do some kind of agreement or something with
Not
them?
on that.
I don't know.
Because he can't legally do that. He's just holding the money for us legally.
Is there a contact number if they have questions on there?
Yeah, yours.
All right.
No, I'm just kidding.
I don't answer
be
the
added.
message.
I was gonna get with the auditor to discuss if they could mail this out for me. I don't know how that works, but, I would say that the auditor's office, if the auditor has time to mail this out, that they could contact them and they could direct those folks to whoever needs, I'll answer the question. You can give my name and number.
Okay.
But,
Brenda, Mark said he could get me the list of all the fire chiefs. And then that way we can get it to him.
their addresses and names should be on those applications in the budget documents that we had for the last meeting, should be, unless.
Well, I thought maybe emailing them, maybe be a little bit quicker.
Yeah, that's fine.
And
That'd be
then
great.
on those letterheads, that's like the fire department letterhead, it could sit in their box till they meet next month on Tuesday.
Sure.
The day after the
And
third.
the auditor, you may want to look at this document and say, in order for this to be an official county document, it needs to have the seal on it and somewhere for me to sign, whatever, you know.
Okay.
This is just rough.
Okay.
So, okay. And again, this is not, well, I won't say what it's not. What I will say what it is it's just a request for how did it go last year, and what do you hope to do this year, and specifically show us some documents, show us an invoice, show us how it improved everything. Give us let us know. So because from year to year, whether or not this continues, hopefully it always will, but there could come a point when lit public safety money runs thin for other reasons, and it needs to apply to other things. So we don't know that yet. All right, thanks.
Thank you for creating the form for us. Appreciate it, Neil.
Yep.
All right. The other items on the budget, I sent an email out. The commissioners got the report back from Baker Tilly regarding the ambulance review. I sent that out. The number in the budget is what is in the contract for the second year of the contract.
Is it 2 ambulances?
It's 3 paramedics, full 24/7 right now. The previous service was 2, and so the report used some of the prior year numbers for the contract amount and for the service, because this is the first year we've actually had that change. So I don't know of any other options that the commissioners have looked at that are in the future, but I know when we discussed the ambulance last year, we kind of agreed on the 1-year term, and then we would revisit it. So
Came 3.
yeah, they signed a 3-year agreement.
I don't think we need 3 ambulances. We're only making 3.5 runs a day between 2 ambulances now. I mean, do we need 3 ambulances to make 3.5 runs in a 24-hour period? What do you think? It's like 1,260 responses they made.
Well, they don't all
It's
come
kind
at
of
3.5 every day. Some
No,
of them
that's
have
true,
12
but-
in one day and one the next. No, you could have 10 calls a day, easy.
I'm gonna say
I've
when
seen that.
I was an EMT, I'll say 6 years ago, and ran with the ambulance service that we had at that time, we had 4 or 5. And
I'm
that
just
was
going by
all
the-
that was all in Clinton.
I'm just going by the numbers.
Yeah,
But-
that was all in Clinton. That wasn't even the northern part. So
And those are 911 calls, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if someone at the Clinton Hospital needs transferred to Union for some procedure or regional or something, then that takes 1 out. So then, and that's a major part of the ambulance's business. And whether we like that or not, transfers are a part of the business that people, it's an urgent, essential need that they provide.
and I will say this too. I went on a transfer from, it was actually across the river, but I'll just say from Cayuga and went to Clinton, and then we had to transfer to Union on a heart attack. And I know we left at 6 p.m. and it was after midnight before I got home. So, I mean, you may have one just consume your whole shift, so to speak. So, it is never the same, I don't think.
It's unpredictable.
The average is about an hour or less, though, 50 minutes or so.
But if you only have two,
The
One-
weather
one-
plays a vital role too.
yeah.
Okay.
And my question is what happened to the basic truck that's Monday through Friday for transfers? They can't do every transfer, I know, because they need medics sometimes, but there's supposed to be a Monday through Friday truck, 8 to 5 or something in there.
Yeah.
It was in the contract.
That's still there, still named in Clinton. I'm pretty sure it's mentioned in that report too.
I didn't see it. I don't even know whether it's probably going to be on my phone. I'm not going to look at it, I can't see it.
Well, we put it in the budget to cover the contract, but it was one item that we said we'd revisit after the report was issued. And so since we just got the report, I just wanted to make sure that everybody was still okay with the budget or if they needed to change anything, so.
Problem I really have with the budget right now is that they took $25,000 of taxpayers' money to do this study, correct? They came for us for appropriating $25,000.
For the Baker Tilly.
But they're not meeting till Wednesday on this, and what they want us to vote on tonight. I would rather not vote on something until I know what's going on. What do they want? The commissioners are gonna meet on Wednesday.
Well, I thought from when I listened to the commissioners meeting, we were all going to kind of sit down and talk about
I think you might be right.
There was a meeting on the 20th, a phone conference call.
I think they thought they would get the report a little bit sooner, and it was about a week and a half later than they expected. Because I originally think they was the 4th, and I just sent that out at the end of last week. I mean,
I just know if we go ahead and appropriate for the three ambulances, and you say that we don't have to put that money out the first year if we don't only want two, but I think everybody on this council knows that once we appropriate that money, it's gonna get spent.
Well, if you appropriate for 3 ambulances and somehow they end up with 2, I mean, I don't, like we just said earlier, like Scott
But
just
I
said,
don't
we
think
could
that'll
ret-
happen,
we
Neil. I
reduce
think,
it,
you know,
but what?
I don't think that'll happen. I think if we put out 3, then we're gonna carry the burden for that. I mean, that's what they're wanting us to do. That's probably why they're meeting on Wednesday, truth be known. I mean, what do they want? Does the commissioner agree we need 3 ambulances? I mean, tell us that.
yeah, I
Don't
know.
take $25,000 of taxpayers' money and just throw it down the drain, and basically that's what they've done if we're gonna go ahead and continue with the program that we've got, without knowing what's going on.
Well, I mean, I think the report, you know, financially, the report discusses what's going on, but I don't think Baker Tilly's role was to determine the logistics of how the ambulance functions in a big sense. I mean, there's a lot that goes on with how the ambulance should function here to best serve the people, and then there's the financial side to it. If I'm not mistaken, Baker Tilly kind of reviewed the financial side of it as it currently runs. Is that the way I understand that report? I read it.
So theoretically, we really didn't get a true report in
Well,
one sense.
I mean,
we
you
got a
gotta
financial
yeah, I
part.
mean, but the commissioners didn't hire Baker Tilly to look at the EMS side of it and the geographical, you know, somewhat they did, but really, I mean, they're looking at
They did
how
this-
we compare to what others are spending, compared to what we're spending versus private and public ambulances and things like that. That's what I took from the report.
It did list the comparison of the run times, I mean, which is not a financial aspect,
Yeah.
and compared to like the national, and I mean, they were below the national time, but.
I really don't think we'll ever get a handle on this until we build our own facility and say, this is where you're gonna be. If you wanna bid this job and this atmosphere, you're gonna be in this building. I think until we get a handle on that, that's the only way we're gonna be able to get a handle on it, is to control that ourselves. Right now, we're buying houses, buying garages, whatever, these ambulance companies. We could get a
Yeah, I
lot
think
cheaper
that's
rate.
been the history. I mean, that's been the historical nature of the ambulance in this county, is that the county just paid for everything. you know, they paid a lump sum figure to a contractor, and those contractors provided their own housing and whatever. And that's just how it's always been. So for us to make a shift to start owning real estate, providing real estate, you know, that's a leap, that's a big step, and it may be the right step. It may or may not be the right step, but it's a huge responsibility at that point, which we could handle, you know, and then, you know, would that help us or not? Because that'll be you know, if you build 2 or 3 fire stations, you're going to spend $1 million on everything. Because you know, once these buildings are constructed, 3 buildings are constructed to meet all the modern requirements for ADA accessibility, fire safety, whatnot. You're going to spend $1 million on 3 buildings, and you know, I'm sure that their savings will come back. You know, once you do that. Perhaps, you know, I'm not look that far into the crystal ball, but I think the overall plan though still has to come from the commissioners, and we can't, you know, if they say this is the plan, this is what we want to do, then our role is to what, you know, fund or not fund that plan.
That's why I think the commissioners need to tell us what they want, because we're just a financial part of this, and they're actually controlling that.
Yeah. And I think every year, I mean, I haven't been on the council that long, you know, for 3 years, but it'll be 3 years. And every year it seems like we always say, well, the commissioners are going to have to tell us what they want to do with this ambulance. You know, and I suppose there's always, and even then, even after they tell us, there's still the question of, well, where's the 3rd station supposed to be? Or I thought there was supposed to be a truck from 8 to 4, and you know, we still have questions even after the plan's developed, so it needs to be clearer.
But I think until we force our hand, I mean, look what we did during budget hearings with the secretarial deal. She wouldn't have got the 5th deputy, and they would still been doing all that work on top of everything, but they finally agreed to put that 5th deputy in as, I guess, her secretary, so to speak. I mean, she's going to do other work, but mainly going to work for the commissioners. Is that correct? And had we not forced our hand, we still would be in that situation today. Do you agree? I mean,
Yes, I do.
Okay. So that's all I'm saying.
I don't know. I mean, it seems like it's an extremely expensive, extremely complicated matter.
Oh.
It really is.
Do we make it that way?
It's a long-term, expensive, complicated
do.
matter that affects people's lives. It really does. It really affects people's lives and health. So,
I noticed
we almost need a task force or some sort of a group. I mean, we form boards and different things, and groups of people to research different things and do studies on different things, but you know, maybe, just maybe, there needs to be some sort of a board set up. Maybe it would help the commissioners. I mean, as a commissioner, just because you're elected a county commissioner doesn't mean you're automatically an expert on ambulance service. You're not. No one would be. But maybe there needs to be some sort of a task force or something to look into. What does, you know, take Baker Tilly's information, take our information, take the commissioner's request, talk to the contractor, you know, see what's going on, and maybe a board or some sort of a group could make a request, or not a request, but a recommendation, say, well, this is what we think we need. You know, maybe you could have a doctor on that board, or you know, a couple firemen, or something, I don't know.
And I agree with that, but I think that we need to be looking at that, not wait till the end of the year when it's going to come due at midnight.
Yeah.
We need to work on that now for maybe
I don't
next
know,
year.
and I think we said that last year.
We did, that's what we asked them to last
We need
year.
for that, you know. I
And
mean,
at the commissioners meeting, they made the comment, because I know I were there, and we stressed that, you know, the funding may not always be there, and they said that they would deal with it at that time. And that is what we asked them not to do. So here we are in the same boat.
You know, I was listening to that meeting the other evening. I wasn't able to attend, but it looked like to me RJ was pretty upset. Matter of fact, he had to go get the gentleman, put him in that car because they refused to take him. Stuff like that shouldn't happen. People's lives are on the line there. And we're paying for that service.
I mean, the ambulance service, we need long-term planning. This year-to-year stuff just doesn't cut it.
gets old.
We need a long-term plan, and we need some people to make some decisions on what this county, what do they want? What does everyone want? And what's best? And what can we afford? What's reasonable?
You know, Neil, I think we wait, not just us, but the commission, everybody in the county, you know, it's elected. You wait until it's due, and they do it. I mean, our health insurance is the same way. We do it year to year. We wait right down the wire. Property casualty is the same way. Those things need to be discussed back in March or something for the following year that we know is going to come up December 31st.
Long-term plan.
We also need
Thank
some
you.
consistency in this planning, because contractors sometimes may not want, you know, if we keep going with contractors for the ambulance bid, some might say, "Hey, I'm not bidding for Vermillion County." They never know what they want from year to year. It changes. I can't afford that. You know, it's too risky. So, you know, I think we've had an ambulance in this county for decades. And you'd think by now we would have a fine-tuned plan that's just razor sharp, and there's no questions about it, but it seems like we're far from that, so.
How close are we to surrounding counties and what they're doing? And how's it
Everyone's
working?
different. I mean, it really, in my experience in being in that industry as a volunteer for 25 years, and I paid attention to it, you know, it wasn't just something I saw them out and see. I actually looked at what they do, and I knew a lot of people that did this stuff, and I watched Terre Haute City go through their pains of becoming a paramedic ambulance service, and rural metro being removed from the picture, and and all these things that it's difficult, but it everyone's so different. You know, if you look at, you know, how does Terre Haute City run 3 ambulances and serve 60,000 people? And we talk about 3 for 15,000, and it seems like too many, or that maybe that's the right number, but we have geographic issues, money's different and everything. It's really a strange industry, and it's so unique to each community, to each county, to each state, that, you know, with the laws and the rules and what people can afford, it's so unique that looking at your neighbors almost, to me, has always been like, it helps a little bit, but you almost can't. If you try and do what they do, you might fail, even though you're doing exactly what they do. You know, it's strange. It's a very unique business for each county to look at.
I don't see why counties spend anything on this. I mean, if they're not making enough money, why can't they just charge more?
They don't get paid.
I was going to say, they don't
It's
get
all done
paid.
by insurance. If the bill comes to $500 and the insurance says you get 10, you get 10. Now you're gonna go after that person, you're not gonna get that much out of them. You might get 50 bucks out of them. You had to pay for medications, you had to pay for everything else. You had to pay to maintain your vehicle, pay for those people that are driving and operating it. None of those expenses change. The only thing that changes is what the insurance will pay you back.
Do you know how much they got paid last year?
I don't know. I don't have a clue.
Does anybody know?
I know.
How much they got from insurance and?
I can tell you
Well,
this.
the industry standard's around 35% payout on what? Am I wrong?
No, I think you're about right.
I mean, that's about 30 to 40% range is the best you could ever hope for on billing, with medical billing with ambulance services. So right there, you know, if you did $1 million worth of service, you'd be lucky to get 300,000. You know, in Medicare, you know, somehow the government gets involved in medical pricing and everything. It's all messed up, and you know, $2,000 call ends up getting paid $700 from Medicare, and then you don't accept it, you don't get anything. So that's a lot of their business. But I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
I'm just saying
no, you're
that.
fine.
And I think insulin's like $130 or $200 a dose, and they get like 35 bucks. They give somebody a shot who's in insulin shock. They get like $35 for that shot that they had to pay for.
So we pay for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's like we are not you know, funding it. We're supporting, or what's the word I'm looking for? Subsidizing. Yeah, the whole system. The whole system's kind of messed up, and we're the taxpayers. In order to keep that thing rolling and smooth, we're putting all this money into it. You know, for better or worse, it's definitely there. It is. It's how it is, and you know that we could all come up with reasons why it is like it is, but it's not an easy fix. You know, how do you fix the Medicare payout, you know, on something like an ambulance call? How do you do that? Well, you don't. You can't.
I'd still like to know how much they made last year. I mean, it'd help us decide if we're gonna start our own service or not. I mean,
Well,
we need to know the numbers.
the unfortunate part is if there is changes, it is October.
Well, I mean-
And I know, but, we don't have time necessarily to change it for next year.
Yeah.
But that's what we said last year too.
Oh.
So, we're gonna have to hold some feet to the fire for changes. If they want changes made.
Yeah, and it won't be easy. Like I say, I think that, I think there needs to be some sort of a meeting or a group of people formed to hammer this out.
Yep.
Because I don't think, elections come and go, and commissioners come and go, and each one of them's not familiar with all that. Ambulance companies come and go. I've seen 4, in my lifetime, maybe 5, I don't remember when I was a little kid, but, so ambulance companies come and go, but the people still live here. The service remain, the need for the service never changes, so we need to fine tune that. And each one of them, every one of the 4 ambulance companies that I've seen, each had a different way of doing it. They all had different numbers of people, different numbers of trucks, different hours, different pays, different everything. They're all unique.
So is there a recommendation for the number in the budget? Do we leave it as it is, or do you wanna change it?
So you have all 3 ambulances in there now?
Correct. It is
$787,000 is the line item in
it's
current.
the contractual amount for the 3 paramedics.
So you can actually make it higher if you want. You can make it lower, you can leave it the way it is. We can make that change tonight, and we'd have to reconfigure some numbers. If there's a vote of 4 people that want to change it to, you guys can find a number that you all, 4 of you at least agree on. We can do a reduction or an addition later. If you reduce it tonight, you can always add to it later on. You couldn't add to it until January or February, but you could add to it. You can reduce it.
Yeah, we can reduce it in January then.
You can reduce it in January, yes.
I mean, I wouldn't know, other than some arbitrary number that I pulled out of thin air, I wouldn't have any idea what to lower it to. I mean, we may not like the plan that's there, and the plan may be expensive, in some folks' eyes. But if you change the numbers, you say, well, 700 and some, let's make it 500 and some, that's a lot better. Well, what have you done? We've totally changed that plan, now what? Now it doesn't work. It's no longer the same plan, and the contractor says, well, I can't do this anymore, we got to be careful what we do until we're 100% sure what it is we're asking for. My recommendation is to leave it alone for now. Whether we add to it or reduce later, that's an argument for later. But for right now, I wouldn't have a clue what to.
Would we like to have a joint meeting with the commissioners to discuss, like, planning in the future?
Yes.
I mean, we'll get in touch.
But I'm
with
like,
them.
I would have no idea what to either raise it or lower it. I mean, I've not studied it at any type of a, so
And even if you
I have
did,
to go with what's recommended.
And even if you did study it, I mean, the contractor sets the price, and the commissioners say, okay, fine, we'll pay that for it. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then you have to look at their business model and start diving into why are they charging us for what they're, what this amount, what does it mean, how did they get there, and then there may be some, you may not get to the bottom of all of it, I don't know. You may not be able to.
You're not going to do it in 30 days.
I mean, they
or
are a
60
private
days
business,
either.
They're a private company. They have a bottom line that they need to see a profit on something that they're doing, and they got to pay employees, and sometimes I see people complain. I'm not a social media user per se, but I do see people complain sometimes. They say, well, the owner of this company or that company, they got a new car. Well,
So Scott,
you know, well, so what? You know, you see that stuff. People get mad if they see the owner of a company buy something. You know, like they're not supposed to have a salary, I guess. I don't know.
So Scott, in the contract is just, right now it's just a 1 year, you're not involved with that?
I'm not involved with it, so I don't.
It's a
know.
3-year contract, but it does say dependent upon council funding.
Well, one thing I think, if it's not in there, it'd be nice to put in there is that we have the right to audit their books.
Yes.
So I know that you can put that
I'd also-
stipulation in there.
I would also like to add for future contracts, I know we had trouble with them not taking certain insurances. Maybe suggesting to the commissioners for contractual reasons that they're required to at least have like, at least maybe some of the major ones. I know at one time they didn't take Anthem, which was surprising. I think they.
Especially in this area.
Right. So that might be something to look at in the future to make sure that people are being covered.
Who was that? Who didn't take Anthem?
The ambulance.
The current?
Mm-hmm.
Really? If you take Medicaid, Medicare, I thought you had to take Anthem.
Well, that may be, and I'm guessing here, but that may have been
shortly after
something
they
with
did re-sign with
interstate
Anthem, so that-
insurance rules on, like maybe they weren't set up to do Anthem because in Illinois you couldn't, or there wasn't Anthem and they didn't, I don't know, I'm just.
I do believe it got corrected, but at one time
I know
there was
that
an
health
issue.
insurance is usually regulated state by state, isn't it? So there may have been some.
I'm just saying for reasons, maybe that's, I don't know if they can put that in the contract or not, but it's something that we need to look at in the future to make sure. I mean,
Well,
'cause
that would be part, like I say, that would be part of the discussion, Ashley, about
Several big, large insurance companies
No.
being in the network.
designing the
Like,
plan.
accepting at least, you know,
And getting
X
bids
amount
on
of
it, and feeling
different
comfortable that,
insurance
well,
companies.
this is the low bidder, they'll do all these things, that's what it costs. Versus, it costs a lot, we don't know why.
Okay.
Or maybe it's perfect, I don't know.
Well, I haven't heard a different number, so as far as changing the numbers, we don't really have a number to change it to.
We can't really change it.
But we do need to plan, we'll get in contact with the commissioners to maybe sort out just a brainstorming idea of ideas, if anything. Other items in the budget, there was a couple items that we will have to do in January. The local health maintenance, we advertised 35,000, however, it is funded by a grant, so their budget was slightly over the 35, so we'll have an additional in January. We can't actually adopt a budget anything higher than what we advertised, and we thought we advertised high enough, but they got grant money, so we'll have to appropriate the additional amount of that grant money in January. And the same with the Recorder's Perpetuation Fund.
There were a couple, recorder's perpetuation, I think there's a surveyor's.
And the surveyors, yes.
We did not, and honestly, I'll take the fall for that one. We hadn't, the software the state uses to do this, they stick in there all the ones you did last year. And so, I just used all the ones we did last year, we didn't have a budget for them.
Yep.
And so, we've already added all those in for next year though, so we won't have that problem with those.
Yeah, and the perpetuation funds are like fee-generated ones, so that way we're gonna use that money that they generated from fees to use first. So we just didn't advertise them, so we can't approve them at this budget, so we'll have those in January.
Well, they're in the order, they're in the budget resolution, they just say you're approving zero.
Yeah.
We didn't advertise. So, but that's because we added them after we realized that they weren't in there. And we had to advertise, and we got all the budgets from all the department heads, and we're like, oh, wait a minute, we didn't.
Last.
That's just for.
What?
There's this, we had to do it's called there's one on there called the allocation fund, that's the existing TIF fund. We have to budget for the bond payments out of there, for next year.
Alternative dispute resolution was not advertised.
Yeah, I don't even know what that one is. So, allocation fund.
The opioid was short.
Opioid was a little short.
CASA was short.
Yeah, CASA was short.
The recorder's records, we're moving from her
We're moving
1,000
some money
budget
over.
to her.
So we're gonna have a bunch of additionals.
And the surveyor's corner perpetuation funds, and I think we have some on the health as well.
Yeah, the health fund was the grant money
There
in
might
it.
be 6.
And ours is
Okay.
usually in June when we get the
And
help.
some of them
It was a
were
different one.
took
So
moves
the
on.
budget's.
Yeah, that one, but the other one
3
is
million,
June.
seems, 3,537,000?
No, that's just the,
Wouldn't that be nice?
the state divides this up into, they don't really care, frankly, what we do with non-taxpayers, with the ones that don't get any property tax or motor vehicle highway tax. So those are called home rule funds.
Okay.
So there's a whole list of home rule funds.
Okay.
That, I think those total, I don't remember, I don't have the thing in front of me, I didn't print one out for myself, I emailed it about it. I didn't print one for myself, yeah. No, yes.
Should be in your packet.
Yeah, so the 3 million is the total of the, what they call, home rule
Rule
funds.
funds, okay. I see that.
Yeah.
See that at the top.
And the first page are the ones that they mostly take care more about. And the total there is 15 million. So the total is 18 and a half, or something like that, I think, yeah. 18 and a half. It's odd because, you know, you think they, like, public safety and certified sheriffs are in that home rule fund, but they don't really, they just make sure we have enough money to fund what we propose, they don't care. The ones on the front, they care because they could, even if they don't draw a tax levy, they could draw a tax levy. We could allocate tax levies to them, I think, so they're in that list.
Speaking of levies, Scott sent out the spreadsheet that lists the levy and the certified rate for the last,
I know
since
it's a lot.
2017. Last year, we did lower the tax rate. We did not increase the levy. If you'll remember, Baker Tilly did come do a report at one point in time of the year, and they mentioned that we were the only county in the state last year that did not do max levy. So it, last year, it effectively lowered the rate by 2%, almost 2%. This year, one of the scenarios that Scott gave us was going to the middle levy, or just so not doing the max levy, but slightly of an increase on the levy amount. And the levy amount is the dollar amount generated. This would also effectively decrease the tax rate by 0.84%. So it would be I mean, it's not a lot, but it's not an increase. So.
If you do the max levy, it would increase, the tax rate would be projected to go up a little bit, not much. I mean, it wouldn't go up much from where it is now. It would go up a little bit. It would be less than it was 2 years ago, but it would still go up a little bit. We're benefiting from there was an increase in assessed value. There's a projected increase in assessed value. So the county's assessed value went from 801 million this year. It's projected to go to 863 million next year. So that increase in assessed value means that you can, to generate the same money, you don't need as much rate. Right. So if we can still generate additional money by, and keep our rate under where it was this year, if those assessed values are correct.
And like you mentioned in the email, it doesn't necessarily guarantee your property taxes go down, because if your assessed rate went up, then it may not be enough to offset the change.
The township rates can go up.
And we don't control, you know, if your township or school district, things like that. Those are also factor into the total amount you pay. So.
Your overall expenditures, though, are going up by $1.5 million this year. So most of that, 1.2 million of that or so, is jail related. 600,000 in bond and interest payments, and close to 600,000 in inmate relocation costs. Now, hopefully, it won't be that much.
And some part of the inmate relocation are coming from the DOC funds that we had, and then the repayments on the bonds are coming out of the public safety, which is income. It's not a property tax generated income.
But it does reduce your flexibility somewhat if you spend that much, more. Then that's less money that we have. So there is an increase in the levy of 500,000 or 600,000, something like that, this year. But we can still get more money generated from taxpayers, and keep the rate actually slightly lower than it is right now, the county rate. But we can do. You don't have to levy taxes at all if you don't want to. I mean, on the one hand, we'd all like that. On the other hand, we'd have problems. So there's a maximum set. There is no minimum.
So the scenario on the ordinance, or the resolution for the budget is the middle levy.
If you want to change it, though, I mean, it takes about 10 or 15 minutes probably to change it. If you want to change it, I don't want to.
I don't want to go to max levy personally. I don't want to do that. I'd like to be able to say that we, kept the rate the same or lower, you know. Right now it'd be almost a 1% decrease in the rate. So-
Just like with inflation coming our way.
Slight
Rate.
reduction, yes,
At the
that's a
minimum.
slight.
Now, that rate, what it shows on here is a tax rate, I tried to explain this, we use a lower assessed value than what we actually think it's going to be when we do the budget projections, so that rate is high on here. I actually think it'll be closer to what's on that spreadsheet, which is just about $1
Yeah,
per.
so the rate I read for the budget adoption will be higher than the actual rate, because like you said, they can't use the full assessed value until it's actually approved.
If we overestimate the assessed value, if it turns out not to be 863 million, but we plug 863 million in and we put a rate here of $1, whatever that is, and then it turns out that our assessed value is lower, you're stuck with what you adopted as the rate. So they can lower that rate after you adopt it, but you can't raise it after you adopt it. So you project, they tell us to use 85% of last year's assessed value to do your projection of assessed value. So that is what we've used 85% of last year's assessed value, which the 85% was 680 million. We actually think it'll be a lot higher. So when that number, if that number holds true, then the actual budget order, you won't have you've approved up to $1.25 rate, but it won't probably, it's gonna be 863, it'll be close to it, I think. Because we've done certified net assessed values now, right? Yeah, so. The certified net assessed value that we submitted to the state for the county this year, for the coming year, is 863 million.
Is farm ground assessed differently?
Well, it's got a maximum.
It's, okay.
Yeah, I think it's 1,000, it's 1,000 an acre, 2,000, yeah. So for years, if you go back and look at I just went back like 5 years, the county's assessed value was decreasing for a while.
Yeah,
And
17.
And we were increasing the levy at the same time, so now we were, you know, the county tax rate was going up every year. The last couple of years, the assessed value for, part of the reason it went down for the first year was because the farm values changed. Then we started to stabilize, and the assessor is saying that values are going up, so. I mean, I know we've all heard from people whose assessed values increased. Yeah, mine did too, so. If your assessed value goes up, you're gonna pay more.
They're getting ready to do the north end now, so get ready.
Okay. Is there any preference to change it from kind of like the middle levy?
Middle sounds good. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, everybody agreeing?
It's high middle.
It's not the max.
I was really going for trying to find a number that kept where you would be able to say we
could
slightly
still-
reduce your rate.
Right.
But you still pay more.
Well, you may not. If your assessed value doesn't change, you will pay
You pay
slightly
less.
I mean, it may be like, you know, a cup of coffee less.
But it also depends on your township.
That's right.
So,
Yeah, the township rate, school rate, library rate, if you're in a town or a city, you got a town or a city rate. And frankly, a lot of people who live in cities and towns are at their property tax caps. So they don't only pay no more than 1% of their assessed value, no matter what. So they may not even see any reduction no matter what we do. We could drop it entirely, and still probably pay the same.
all right. Well, if there are no changes, then we are ready to read the budget. I have one that says 20-20 and one that says -21.
You didn't know if they had to have numbers since they are ordinances?
Or resolution.
I mean, resolutions, we didn't know.
This
if
is,
they-
and this is, I know it's awkward, this is, the state requires it to be just like this. So, and they literally call it an ordinance or resolution. So you guys don't know what it is. I tried to submit one year where I took their exact words and I just retyped them and they wouldn't take it. It was like, well, it says the same thing, like, no, it has to be this form.
Okay, so does it matter if it says -20 or 21?
Well, there's two different ones.
No, there's,
They had the same numbers.
Oh, sorry, I
there-
thought you gave me. Nope, it is the same one.
Okay.
Sorry,
It's
sorry.
okay.
My fault.
I just want to make sure I read the right one.
Yeah.
I only want to read it
It's
once.
20, not 21.
It's a mouthful.
So what ordinance number are you gonna read?
20.
20.
20?
20,
20,
20-20.
20, 20?
20, 21, 20.
20,
Yeah, I took that.
21, 20.
20.
The twos just got me all mixed up.
Would it be
That's-
20?
is that a one? That's a one?
It's a 2021-20.
Mine says 2020.
Oh, mine, yeah.
20, 21, 20.
2021-20.
She was just writing
Is what it-
Too many twos. Come on now.
Those are the
When's that
numbers,
meeting?
those are the magic numbers.
When's that meeting?
Which one?
I don't know.
Oh, we gotta do.
No.
Please, you have,
I got too many
you actually have to sign this before you leave tonight, you have to upload it on the gateway.
Okay,
with your signature.
so I need to read it first.
Top 20.
All right, and then after I read it, we'll
I
need
changed it.
a motion and a second to adopt the budget.
20, 21, 20. I had to change that.
Correct,
1 to
Scott?
0.
Yes,
Okay.
and 4 votes in favor.
Yes, and 4
Okay,
votes.
to 0.
We'll make
The
sure they're
numbers are
ready.
the same.
Yes, the other two.
All right, so the ordinance or resolution for appropriations and tax rates for Vermillion County for 2022, excuse me. First, we have the general fund with an adopted budget of $9,061,316, an adopted tax levy of $7,875,000, an adopted tax rate of 1.1581. The 2015 reassessment fund has an adopted budget of $275,000, adopted tax levy of $110,000, with an adopted tax rate of 0.0162. The highway fund has an adopted budget of $2,584,000, with an adopted tax levy of 0, and adopted tax rate of 0. The highway special fund has an adopted budget of $600,000, the adopted tax levy of 0, and adopted tax rate of 0. The local road and street fund has an adopted budget of $315,750, with an adopted tax levy of 0, and adopted tax rate 0. Cumulative bridge fund has an adopted budget of $580,300, with an adopted tax levy of $320,521, in an adopted tax rate of 0.0371. The health fund has an adopted budget of $194,470, with an adopted tax levy of $140,000 and an adopted tax rate of 0.0206. The emergency telephone system fund has an adopted budget of $278,495, an adopted tax levy of 0, and an adopted tax rate of 0. The plan commission fund has an adopted budget of $18,137, an adopted tax levy of 0, and an adopted tax rate 0. The Cumulative Capital Development Fund has an adopted budget of $333,200, an adopted tax levy of $172,787, and an adopted tax rate of 0.0200. Economic Development Fund has an adopted budget of $766,204, an adopted tax levy of 0, and an adopted tax rate of 0. The total adopted budget is $15,006,872. The total adopted tax levy is $8,618,308, and the adopted tax rate of is 1.2520. So our 2022 budget will need to be approved with a motion and a second.
Motion.
Second.
Alright, I have a motion from Mr. Bush and a second from Mr. Weir to approve the 2022 and adopt the ordinance or resolution for appropriations and tax rates. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, please signify by saying no.
Aye.
Alright. Budget is approved. That was the last item on the agenda. The only other items that we need to discuss are meeting dates. We are going to try to coordinate our November meeting to line up with the Elanco TIF bonds approval. We're gonna try to work out the time schedule so that it can be on the 10th tentatively. Once we get that timeline figured out, we can let everybody know for sure if we can do both meetings on the same day.
Okay, and then you're thinking December?
And then the December meeting would be December
16th.
16th, it's a Thursday.
Okay.
So, is there any public comment this evening? None? All right, no public comment. Entertain a motion to adjourn. A second?
You?
All right, a motion and a second, meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Yes, don't leave, we need your signatures.
Please don't leave.